Let's get a quick take on Denver District Attorney Beth McCann declining to file charges against police officials in an open records case under investigation since March 2017. In a written statement, McCann noted that Denver PD mishandled the case in question and should examine how it handles open records inquiries, yet there isn't enough evidence to prove a violation of the Colorado Open Records Act. Pat Calhoun from Westward, we're used to different charges not being filed with the police regarding district attorney. This is a little bit different. What do we need to know about this case, since it is much different than we're used to hearing?
Well, it involves an open records request, so it isn't all that surprising that DA McCann, this is her first case like this, declined to file criminal charges, because if we're not filing criminal charges against police who shoot people, I don't think criminal charges against someone who fails to comply with an open records request makes sense. There is going to be an independent third-party investigation, which is good, because even if they're not criminal charges, certainly there should be an investigation. There should be some punishment. This is Chief White and Matt Murray, who reporters have had complaints about for a long time about not responding to things. In this case, he didn't respond to a union request for open records. The CORA is a really important tool. It should be observed, and there will be some kind of punishment.
Mike Krause, the Independence Institute. What did you think of McCann? Did she make the right call?
She likely made the right call, and I say that because the criminal intent in CORA is very, very difficult to prove. In fact, it's a very high bar, and a lot of it has to do with the nature of CORA, where you could say, no, there's no documents to this, and then a year later, guess what? You find a document, and it could very well have been inadvertent. And by the way, as an organization that does a fair amount of CORA, we find this to be true, that sometimes things you think, wow, what's going on here? But at the end of the day, it could very well have been ineptitude, poor record keeping, or simply someone saying, nope, don't have it, and then finding it a year later. The interesting thing is that this criminal intent in CORA is such a high bar and so difficult to prove that actually this year in Senate Bill 40, which upgrades our CORA law, they actually removed the criminal penalty from CORA altogether.
Penfield Tate, attorney at QTAC Rock, also a longtime state lawmaker, joins us. We know charges will not be filed, but what kind of changes does DPD need to undergo to answer the situation?
You know, I don't know what they need to do. I think the DA's decision was the right one in light of the fact that it's almost impossible to prove a knowing, willful, and intentional violation of open records that would bring the criminal penalty. But let's not forget the fact that she was clear in her correspondence that the police clearly did an awful job in responding, slipshod, careless, and I think many believe it was intentional. The question is whether you can prove it. So at some point, the manager of safety is probably going to have to put her foot down and possibly just take that responsibility from police, sheriff, fire, and run all of those requests through the manager's office to make sure there's a timely response. With the problem we've had with law enforcement in this city, even though there have been some changes, you can't afford what appears to be an intentional evasion of the laws requiring transparency.
Hans Meyer rounds out our panel. New to the program, thanks for being here with the Meyer Law Office. What do you think this situation does for the DPD reputation in the community?
Well, the DPD, as well as local, state, national government, is suffering from a crisis of credibility on a lot of different fronts. And I think, aside from the criminal intent issue about whether or not there's sufficient evidence to file charges, the bigger question here is open government. You know, open records laws exist for a very important reason, as they're a fundamental backbone to the democratic process and the idea of an open society. So to the extent that there is not criminal accountability, there absolutely needs to be an accounting and some responsibility within agencies to be responsive to Open Records Act requests. Those are critical for journalists, they're critical for people doing investigation, for policymakers, and that is absolutely a fundamental principle of open government.